When I saw my son's fiancée trying on her wedding dress in our living room, I remember thinking, she looked like family already. Her laughter filled the house the way spring sunlight fills an old room, bright, warm, and young. I had no idea that in 2 days, that same laughter would echo like thunder in my memory, something I'd never be able to unhear. My name is Margaret, and I'm 61 years old. I've been married to Daniel for 38 of them. We have one son, Ethan, who's 29, a quiet, kind boy who grew into a man I was proud of. He'd met Sophie a year ago through work. She was polite, soft-spoken, and thoughtful, always offering to help with dishes, always bringing me flowers from the little shop near her apartment. When he told us he wanted to marry her, I remember thinking, finally, God has rewarded me with a daughter. That week, our home was alive with wedding chaos. Flower samples on the table, dress fittings, phone calls, and late-night coffee runs. I barely slept, but it was the kind of exhaustion that felt joyful. Sophie stayed over often, helping me plan, calling me Mom in that effortless, affectionate tone. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there. Small, silent details that only make sense in hindsight. The way Daniel looked away too quickly whenever she walked into the room. The way her laughter would falter for half a second when he joined our conversations. At the time, I thought it was just awkwardness. The kind that happens when in-laws are still getting used to each other. But beneath all the celebration, something cold and quiet was already growing. The morning it all began, I woke up early to bake Ethan's favorite breakfast, cinnamon rolls with orange glaze. It was a family tradition, something I'd done since he was a little boy. Sophie came into the kitchen in her robe, her hair tied up loosely. She looked tired. I remember noticing the faint tremble in her hands when she reached for the coffee mug. "Big day tomorrow," I said, trying to lighten her mood. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, big day." I thought it was nerves. Every bride has them. But as she turned away, I saw Daniel walk into the kitchen behind her, and something about his voice when he greeted her made my stomach tighten. "Morning, Sophie," he said softly, almost warmly. Too warmly. She froze for just a heartbeat before turning around, her face calm again. That single glance, the one they shared in silence, it didn't last longer than a breath. But it was enough to plant a seed of unease inside me. A mother's instinct is sharper than she realizes. The rest of that day was a blur of errands. I was arranging flowers at the church, while Daniel handled last-minute payments with the caterer. Sophie went with Ethan to pick up the suits. Everything seemed normal again, but that flicker of suspicion wouldn't leave me. It followed me like a shadow, quiet but constant. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. Daniel was next to me, scrolling through his phone. "Can you believe our little boy's getting married?" I said softly, trying to invite conversation. He smiled without looking up. "Yeah, time flies, doesn't it?" But his voice felt distant, like someone reading lines instead of feeling them. For years, Daniel and I had grown apart in small, invisible ways. We still had dinner together, still shared a bed, but the laughter had gone missing somewhere along the years. I had made peace with it, or thought I had. The following evening, just 2 nights before the wedding, everything unraveled. It was late. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. Ethan had gone out for his bachelor dinner with friends, and Sophie was staying over in the guest room. Daniel had been working late in his study. Or so I thought. I was folding laundry in the hallway when I heard a whisper. A voice. Then another. Soft, quick, urgent. It came from behind the slightly ajar door of the study. At first, I thought it was Daniel on a work call. But when I heard Sophie's voice, trembling, whispering his name, my heart stopped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood there, frozen, listening to the words that would burn themselves into my memory. "Daniel, we can't do this." "Not now," she whispered. His voice was lower, desperate. I just needed to see you. One last time before she's truly yours. There are moments in life that split time in half, before and after. That was mine. Before that moment, I was a wife, a mother, a woman planning her son's wedding. After it, I was something else entirely. I pushed the door open slowly, my hand shaking. They both turned. Daniel's face went white. Sophie covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. For a second, no one spoke. The room smelled faintly of his cologne and her perfume. Scents I knew too well, now blended into something sickening. "Margaret?" He started, stepping toward me. "Don't," I said quietly. My voice didn't even sound like mine. "Don't say a word." Sophie began to cry. Soft at first, then breaking into silent sobs. I turned to her. "How long?" I asked. She shook her head. "It was before Ethan. It was a mistake, I swear." I felt my knees weaken, my chest tightening until breathing hurt. "Before Ethan?" I whispered. "And you never thought to tell anyone? Not even when you stood in this house, planning a wedding with my son?" Daniel looked like a man drowning, his lips trembling but unable to speak. All I could do was stare at them. These two people who had burned down everything I built in silence behind closed doors. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not then. I just turned around and walked out of that room. As I reached the hallway, I could hear Sophie sobbing, Daniel calling my name, but their voices were distant, muffled by the rush of blood in my ears. I went straight to the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at the untouched plate of cinnamon rolls from that morning, cold, hard, and useless now. It was 2 nights before my son's wedding, and I had no idea how to tell him that the woman he loved had already betrayed him. With his own father. I sat there until sunrise, replaying every laugh, every hug, every dinner, every moment that now carried the weight of a hidden truth. The sun rose, indifferent to the ruin that had just unfolded inside my home. Its light spilled through the kitchen window, soft and golden, falling across the table where I sat. The same table where Ethan had done his homework as a boy, where Daniel and I had once celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas mornings. Now it was just a battlefield of memories. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move for hours. My mind kept circling around one impossible question. Do I tell my son? Every answer hurt. If I told him, I'd shatter his heart, destroy the joy he'd been waiting for all his life. If I kept it secret, I'd be protecting a lie that would eat me alive. At 6 a.m, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn to know it was Daniel. His breathing gave him away, that uneven rhythm that comes after a night of guilt. "Margaret," he said quietly, "please, we need to talk." I stared at the window. "No, Daniel. You need to talk. I've already heard more than enough." He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, his hands trembling. "It was years ago," he began. "Before she met Ethan, it was one night. I didn't even know she'd end up with our son," I finished for him. My voice cracked on the last word. "You didn't know, but you knew before the wedding, didn't you?" He hesitated. That pause told me everything. "Daniel," I said slowly, "how long have you known?" He lowered his head. "A few weeks." I felt my stomach twist. "And you said nothing?" "You stood there beside me, helping her choose flowers, watching Ethan write his vows, knowing all of this." His voice broke. "I thought it would destroy him, Margaret. I thought it was better if we all lived a lie," I snapped. "If I woke up every morning and watched my son kiss the woman who once shared your bed?" The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. He didn't look at me again. There was no defense left to make. I stood, pushing the chair back with a quiet scrape. "Pack a bag, Daniel." "I don't want you here when Ethan comes home." "Where will you go?" he asked weakly. "I don't know yet," I said. but not here. Not in this house that you've turned into a grave." He left without arguing. The sound of the front door closing felt final, a curtain dropping after the end of a cruel play. Sophie didn't come out of the guest room until noon. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked younger, smaller, like a child who'd lost her way. She stood in the doorway, clutching her hands together. "Margaret, I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked at her. The girl who was supposed to become my daughter, the girl who'd shared coffee with me, called me Mom, smiled across the dinner table. "Do you love my son?" I asked softly. Her chin trembled. "Yes, more than anything. What happened with Daniel? It was before Ethan. I was lost then. He was kind and I made a mistake. I swear if I could take it back." "But you didn't tell him," I interrupted. "You looked him in the eyes every day knowing what you'd done. You planned to marry him while keeping the secret. You don't get to call that love." Tears rolled down her face, but I felt nothing. No pity, no rage, just an emptiness too wide to fill. "I need to tell him," I said. "He deserves to know who he's marrying." She gasped. "Please don't." "Margaret, he'll never forgive me. Or you. I can live with that," I said quietly, "but I can't live with silence." She collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably, whispering Ethan's name over and over. I turned away before my heart could soften. Some truths are merciful only when they're told quickly. When Ethan came home that evening, the sky had turned gray, as if the world itself had dimmed in sympathy. He was laughing when he walked in, phone in hand, telling me about his night out with friends. Then he saw my face. "Mom? What's wrong?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just looked at him. My son, my only child, the man I'd raised to believe in kindness and honesty. "Sit down, Ethan," I said finally. "There's something I need to tell you." He frowned. "Is it Dad? Did something happen?" I swallowed hard. "It's about Sophie." That name alone changed everything in the room. His smile faded, his brow furrowed. "What about her?" I took a breath that felt like a blade in my throat. "She and your father, they had a relationship. Years ago, before she met you. At first, he just stared at me, blank, silent like he hadn't heard the words. Then came disbelief. "What? No, that's not possible." "I wish it wasn't," I whispered. "I found out last night." He stood up abruptly, pacing the floor. "You're telling me my fiancée, the woman I'm supposed to marry in 2 days, was with Dad?" I nodded, tears finally spilling down my face. "I'm so sorry, Ethan." He pressed his hands to his head as if trying to hold his thoughts together. "How long have you known?" "Since last night," I said, "and your father, for a few weeks." That broke him. I saw it. The trust, the safety, the family he'd grown up believing in, all shatter in one breath. He walked to the door, his voice hoarse. "Where is she?" "In her room," I said quietly. He didn't wait. I followed him down the hallway but stopped at the corner, unseen as he opened the guest room door. "Sophie," he said, his voice low, trembling. She turned, her face pale. "Ethan, please." "How could you?" His voice cracked. "With my father, Sophie. And you were just going to pretend it never happened?" She fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't know I'd ever meet you, Ethan. I swear I didn't know. I never meant to hurt you." He looked down at her for a long, painful moment. Then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from him, he said, "You already did." He walked past her, past me, out the front door. And I didn't try to stop him, because sometimes a mother's love means watching her child walk straight into heartbreak and knowing it's still the right thing to do. That night, the house was silent again. No laughter, no plans, no music, just silence and the distant sound of rain starting outside. Daniel was gone. Ethan hadn't come home. Sophie had left a note on the counter, begging for forgiveness before leaving as well, and I I just sat alone in the living room surrounded by flowers meant for a wedding that would never happen. I picked one up, a white lily, and whispered, "Maybe it's better this way." Because even though everything had fallen apart, at least the truth was out. And sometimes, the truth, painful as it is the only thing that can save us. The next morning, the world carried on as if nothing had changed. Birds still chirped, cars still passed by our house. Somewhere down the street, someone's sprinklers clicked on, watering bright green lawns. But inside me, everything had gone quiet. The phone started ringing before 8. The first call was from the wedding planner. She wanted to confirm floral delivery. I told her, voice steady, "There won't be a wedding." She hesitated, then gently said she was sorry and hung up. The second call came from Ethan's best friend, Matt. "Hey, Mrs. Turner, is Ethan okay? He's not answering his phone. Sophie said there's some kind of family emergency." My throat tightened. "There was," I said softly. "Just give him time." Within a few hours, word started to spread. First through family, then neighbors, then the small circle of friends who'd been invited to the ceremony. Small towns have a way of turning whispers into wildfires. By afternoon, I couldn't go online without seeing fragments of speculation. "Did you hear? The wedding's off. Something happened with the bride and his father." Unbelievable, poor Margaret. I stopped reading. I didn't need the world's pity. I was still trying to make peace with my own. Around sunset, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there. Eyes red, face pale, suit jacket still in his car. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside silently. He walked into the living room where the remnants of wedding decorations still lay. Ribbons, candles, unopened boxes. He picked up a photograph from the coffee table, one from his engagement party, where he and Sophie were laughing under fairy lights. For a moment, I thought he might cry again. Instead, he said, "I went to see Dad." My stomach tightened. "And?" "He admitted everything," Ethan said, his voice flat. "Told me it happened years ago. That he thought it didn't matter anymore. But it does. It matters because he lied about it. Because she lied about it, and because now I can't look at either of them without feeling sick." I wanted to reach out to him, but he pulled away slightly, still staring at the photo. Then he said something that broke me. "I wish you hadn't told me, Mom." The words hit harder than any shout could have. I blinked, feeling them sink into my chest like stones. "You wish I hadn't?" "I know you meant well," he said, voice shaking. "But if you hadn't told me, maybe I could have been happy. Maybe I never needed to know I swallowed hard. Ethan, happiness built on lies doesn't last. I couldn't let you start your life with someone who'd already destroyed part of mine." He didn't answer. He just placed the photo back on the table and looked around, as if trying to recognize the house he grew up in. After a long pause, he whispered, "I'm leaving town for a while. I need space. From all of this." I nodded. "Where will you go?" "Matt's place." "Then maybe out west for a few months. I don't know." "Okay," I said quietly. "Just promise me one thing. Don't carry their shame as your own. You did nothing wrong." He gave a weak nod, hugged me once, stiff, formal, almost like saying goodbye, and left. The sound of his car driving away was the loneliest noise I've ever heard. 2 days later, the day that should have been his wedding day, I found myself sitting in the empty church parking lot. There were still flowers in the trash bins, the faint echo of laughter from rehearsal night clinging to the walls. Inside, a janitor was sweeping petals off the floor. He nodded at me politely, not recognizing who I was. I walked down the aisle alone. No music, no candles, no guests. Just silence. I reached the altar and stood where my son should have stood, tall, smiling, waiting for his bride. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I took away your big day, but I saved your life. A tear slipped down my cheek, landing on the polished wood. I left it there. A small, quiet offering. Weeks passed. Daniel moved out permanently. He called once, not to apologize, but to say he'd found a small apartment across town and wanted to keep things civil. Civil. That word stung. Our marriage had been many things. Messy, passionate, sometimes fragile, but never coldly civil. I told him there was nothing left to discuss. Sophie never reached out again. Her family sent a message asking for privacy and understanding, but I ignored it. Some wounds heal better without reopening. As for Ethan, he kept his word. He left town. I got postcards sometimes, never with much written on them, just a doing okay or hope you're well. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close to peace. One afternoon, about a month after everything fell apart, I went into Ethan's room to dust. The room was neat, almost untouched, but there was a letter on his desk I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't sealed, just a single sheet of paper with his handwriting. Shaky, uncertain. Mom, I know you did what you thought was right. Maybe someday I'll thank you for it. Right now, it just hurts. But I keep thinking, if you hadn't told me, maybe I would have found out later. Maybe never. I don't know which is worse. Still, I don't blame you. I just wish love didn't have to be this cruel. I folded the note carefully and pressed it to my heart. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something deeper, understanding. And sometimes, that's all we get in this life. Not happy endings, just quiet truth. That evening, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the sunset melt over the horizon. The same kitchen, the same chair, but a different woman sat there now. I wasn't the naive wife who trusted too easily, or the blind mother who believed in picture-perfect families. I was someone else, stronger, quieter, unafraid of the truth, even when it hurt, because the truth, as painful as it is still the only thing that sets us free. 3 months later, autumn arrived, my favorite season. The air smelled of rain and fallen leaves, the sky stretched wide and calm, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the sound of children returning from school. For years, I'd imagined this time in my life differently. I thought I'd be a mother-in-law, planning holidays with my son and his new wife, filling the house with laughter and family dinners. But instead, I was alone. And yet, strangely, I wasn't broken. Every morning I woke before sunrise, brewed my coffee and sat by the kitchen window, the same one that had witnessed so much pain, to watch the day begin. The silence that once felt unbearable now felt peaceful, like the house was finally breathing again. I started volunteering at the local women's center, a small brick building near the library. The first time I walked in, I only meant to drop off some donations, but a counselor named Judy, warm and soft-spoken, asked if I'd like to stay for a support group session. I hesitated at first. I didn't think of myself as someone who needed support. I'd always been the strong one, the listener, the comforter, the problem solver. But that day, I stayed. There were 8 women in the circle. Different ages, different stories. A teacher whose husband left her after 30 years. A nurse who was raising 2 children alone. A grandmother estranged from her son. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled. I found out my husband cheated on me, I began, with my son's fiancée. 2 nights before their wedding. For a long moment, there was silence. Then one of the women, a quiet lady named Patricia, reached over and touched my hand. "You survived," she said softly. "That's all that matters." Something in me broke, or maybe it healed. For the first time in months, I cried, not the angry, hollow tears I'd shed before, but something deeper, cleaner. After that day, I kept going back. Little by little, life began to feel full again. Not perfect, but real. I repainted the kitchen, took long walks every evening, called my sister more often, even baked again. something I hadn't done since before the wedding disaster. There was a day, sometime in late October, when I found myself laughing with Judy at the center over something small. A spilled cup of coffee, I think. The sound startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard my own laughter that I almost didn't recognize it. Healing, I realized, doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly like sunlight through blinds, small, steady, patient. One weekend, Ethan came home. I saw his car in the driveway, and for a moment, my heart jumped the way it used to when he was little and came home from school with good news. He stood at the door, smiling faintly. "Hey, Mom." His hair was longer, his face leaner, but his eyes, those warm brown eyes, were the same. I let him in and made tea. We sat at the table, and the air between us was careful at first, filled with the weight of what had happened. Then he said, "I've been thinking a lot." I nodded. "About?" "Everything. Dad. Sophie. You?" He took a deep breath. "You were right to tell me. I was angry, but now I see it. You didn't ruin my life, Mom. You saved it." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I still don't know how to forgive them," he said, "but I want to forgive you." For the way I reacted, I reached across the table and took his hand. "You don't need to forgive me, Ethan. I understand. You lost more than I did. I just wanted you to have a chance at a clean beginning." He smiled. Small, but real. Maybe we both deserve that. We spent the rest of the evening cooking dinner together, laughing about nothing, talking about everything except the past. And for the first time in a long while, our house felt alive again. That night, after we went to bed, I sat on the porch with my tea, looking up at the stars. The air was cold, but my heart felt warm. There was peace, not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from surviving and still choosing to hope. I thought about Daniel sometimes. I wondered if he was lonely too. Part of me wanted to hate him forever, but another part, the older, softer part, knew that carrying hatred only kept me chained to him. So one morning, I wrote him a letter. "Daniel, we can't undo what's been done, but I want to thank you for the years that were good, for the laughter, for our son, for the home we built, even if it didn't last. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Margaret." I never mailed it. I didn't need to. Just writing it was enough. Months later, I stood in my garden trimming the rose bushes, the same ones that had wilted the week the wedding was called off. They were blooming again. As I clipped away the dead branches, I realized something. Healing isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about knowing it did and still choosing to grow. I've learned that sometimes love ends, trust breaks, and the people we thought we knew the best become strangers overnight. But that doesn't mean life stops. It just changes its rhythm. I still miss what could have been, but I no longer mourn it. Because now, when I look at my reflection, I don't see the woman who lost everything. I see the woman who found herself. It's been over a year now. The seasons have come and gone. Summer heat, autumn rain, winter snow, and now spring again. I've started to measure time not by months, but by the way my heart feels lighter with each sunrise. My life doesn't look like I once imagined it would. There's no wedding photo on the mantle, no Sunday dinners with a bustling family, no husband's jacket hanging by the door, but there's peace. And peace, I've learned, is a kind of love too. Some evenings, I still walk down to the park near our house. It's the same park where Ethan used to ride his bike as a boy, his father running behind him, cheering. The same park where Sophie once joined us for picnics before everything fell apart. It's strange how the world keeps turning, even when your own feels frozen. The trees are taller now, the benches repainted. Children's laughter fills the air, and for a moment, I let it wrap around me. The sound of innocence untouched by betrayal. I sit on the same old bench, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, and I think about how everything began with love. That's the part people forget when they talk about betrayal. They forget that before the lies, there was love. Before the silence, there was laughter. Before the heartbreak, there was hope. And even after everything, that love still leaves a shadow behind. Not to haunt you, but to remind you that you were once capable of giving your heart completely. Sometimes Ethan calls me on his drives home from work. He says he's seeing someone new, someone kind, steady, honest. I can hear the caution in his voice, the fear of believing again. But I also hear something else, a quiet kind of joy. I tell him not to rush. That love, the real kind, doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes softly, like rain that stays. He laughs when I say that. "You're turning into one of those wise YouTube moms, aren't you?" he teases. Maybe I am, because if life has taught me anything, it's that pain doesn't destroy us. Denial does. The truth hurts, yes, but it also heals. There's a small framed photo in my living room now, not of my wedding or Ethan's engagement, but of my garden. Just sunlight on blooming roses. It reminds me that beauty can grow even in soil that once held tears. I used to think I'd never forgive Daniel, that I'd carry that betrayal forever like a scar across my heart. But one night, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't saying, "It's okay." It's saying, "I'm done hurting." So I let go. I forgave him quietly, in the same silence he once left me in. No phone calls, no closure talk, just me, my heart, and the decision to stop bleeding over the same wound. I see Sophie sometimes, not in person, but online. She seems to have left the city. She's volunteering too, working with youth programs. Her smile looks different, softer, humbler. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. Maybe we're both just two women who made choices we thought we could live with and learned we couldn't. Sometimes I think forgiveness isn't just for those who wronged us, it's for ourselves too, so that when we look in the mirror, we see more than the woman who was betrayed. We see the woman who survived. If I could go back to that night, 2 days before the wedding, and choose again whether to tell Ethan or to stay silent, I would still tell him, because lies, no matter how carefully hidden, always find their way to the light. And when they do, the truth hurts less than the years of pretending would have. I often wonder how many mothers are out there right now, sitting in silence, carrying truths too heavy to speak. How many wives are holding on to marriages built on secrets? How many sons or daughters will one day learn something that shatters them, only to rebuild stronger? If you're one of them, if you're carrying something like that, I want you to know you are not alone. You can survive the truth, you can outgrow the pain, and you can rebuild, even from ruins. Because healing doesn't come from fixing what broke. It comes from choosing to live again after it did. When I lock up the house each night, I turn off the lights, but I always leave one lamp glowing in the hallway. Just a small one, enough to see my way if I wake in the dark. It reminds me of something my mother used to say, "Even in darkness, leave a light on for yourself." I think that's what life is. Learning to leave a light on even when everything else goes dark. If you've listened this far, thank you for sharing this space with me, for hearing my story. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have told your son? Would you have destroyed the wedding to save him from a lifetime of lies? I wonder what you would have done. Let me know in the comments below. And if my story found a place in your heart tonight, don't forget to stay with me for the next one. Because every story here, even the painful ones, is just another step toward healing. Every wound tells a story. Every story teaches us how to live again